where you are and what you're experiencing makes sense because of the life that you've lived and the stories that have been part of your life. Like, it makes sense that you are where you are. And like, just, it's God loves you right where you are. Jesus comes to you right where you are. And he comes without any condemnation. He doesn't come wagging his finger and saying, I told you you shouldn't be here, or how did you get here? But instead, he comes to you and says, I'm so glad to be with you right here in this place.
Hello and welcome to the Being Formed podcast, where we explore the world of spiritual formation, spiritual direction, soul care, and life with God. I'm your host, Adam Ormord, and I'm delighted to bring you a conversation that touches right at the heart of what we believe here at LifePoint Resources, that being attached to God as our primary caregiver is foundational. The transformation happens as that attachment becomes more and more secure. Before I introduce our guests, I want to let you know we recorded our conversation toward the end of September 2025. You'll notice that Geoff refers to his favorite baseball team, the Chicago Cubs, and the fact that they made the 2025 playoffs. Well, it took me a little while to publish this recording. Unfortunately for Geoff, the Cubs didn't fare too well. They didn't make it to the World Series. Sorry about that, Geoff. It took me a little while to publish this because I was in Spain for the majority of the month of October. You see, in addition to leading LifePoint Resources, I work with an incredible team of spiritual directors and faculty who lead a spiritual direction training program called Deepen. I would have loved to post this conversation back in early October, but I felt it best to put the podcast on a bit of hiatus while I attended to the students who are currently training to be spiritual directors. So I made the hard choice of leaving my microphone at home and trusting you'd understand if we took a little break in releasing episodes of the Being Formed podcast for a little while. Now that I'm back home, I'm thrilled to offer this conversation and many more as a resource of LifePoint. We'll do our best to keep providing great conversations to enrich your life with God. I can't tell you how grateful I am for your grace, not just in a little break in our rhythm, but just in listening to our podcast and giving such great feedback too. Thank you. Our guests for today's conversation are Geoff and Cyd Holsclaw. They're pastors, coaches, teachers, thought partners, and they stand at this intersection of theology and neuroscience and spiritual formation. And they have a new book. It's called Landscapes of the Soul. You're going to love this subtitle: How the Science and Spirituality of Attachment Can Move You into Confident Faith, Courage, and Connection. I'm excited to introduce Geoff and Cyd to you. I love their work, and I love their hearts even more. Well, Cyd and Geoff Holsclaw, thank you so much for joining the Being Formed podcast. It's a joy, it's a delight to have you both with us. And I just want to begin today by welcoming you here to this table and asking you both, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I am doing great. So it's a sunny day after a couple days of rain. So sun always really helps. And yeah, I just feel like we had some good connection time earlier today, and it's a good day. I'm glad to be here with you.
Thank you, Cyd. I'm grateful to see you today. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Looking forward to some evening baseball with the Cubs, who are headed to the playoffs. We had some good planning sessions with a couple good friends. So yeah, on the whole,
good.
I've been just to be a full person though. I've been needing to figure out a bunch of email and website minutia for our nonprofit. So that's been less than. So I'm also bringing that. It's not done.
Yeah.
You know how it's like there's this project dangling out there and it's not done, but I'm here and I'm bringing all of that.
Yeah, good. I was just thinking it's a great time for sports, isn't it? We're recording this at toward the end of September. So we're just right around the time of playoff baseball, but also college football and NFL is we're not video recording this, but Geoff is not down with football.
No, I'm not. I'm not a college football fan.
Okay.
But yeah, this
He
is like
is seeking the road of suffering by being a Bears fan.
Yeah, I'm a Bears and a Cubs fan.
Okay.
But you're right. This is like the golden time of you get like playoff baseball and then football season's back. So this is a great time of year. And I did, true confession, I kind of tricked Cyd because she didn't think I was a big sports fan when we got married. And that's just because I was like in school, in college, and pursuing this lovely woman, trying to convince her the impossible that she should marry me. And then I was straight into school for becoming a pastor, all that stuff. So it was like 3 years in when I finally had time to like watch sports. And then she was like, "Who are you?" So I was like, I actually really like sports. She knew I was competitive already.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's a little bit of thank you for receiving my sportsness on this podcast. I don't know if that's a normal thing or not.
Yeah, except I'm usually rooting for the losing team. So that's a common theme on this podcast. So anyway, yeah. Well, you already alluded a bit to this, Geoff, when you said I'm bringing in more than just the good stuff. I'm also bringing in a lot of things I'm thinking about. I want to ask that same question, how you doing, but ask it on like a deeper way. I do this with all of our guests. Just how is it with your soul? If you could think about like, how is my soul doing today? Would you change your answer at all, or would you nuance that a bit?
I would say, yeah, my soul is in tension. So that's how my soul is. My soul is grieving a few things, but then also just really seeking that Psalm 131 of I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with his mother. And so just catching myself when the grief and the sadness and the heaviness is there, to then also say, I'm not going to look too high. I'm not going to concern myself with things that I have no power to do anything about, and just come and settle again in the lap of the Lord and just be calmed and quieted.
Thank you.
I would say I'm very, upbeat. And when I'm in social situations, even like this, I bring a lot of positive energy. I think my soul is kind of sad about the state of politics and the church in America. Like it's been that way for a bit, and I was just able to kind of name it and talk to Cyd about it even just this morning. So yeah, I think my soul is heavy. So
yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I would have to say, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit of that tension too. Even noticed that in some of my spiritual direction sessions that I've had the last few days, I'm carrying some of that in with me, even just some of that tension of the last couple of weeks, and what's happening in our country, and I think the state of the church. And I do want to talk about hope, and I pick up on major themes of hope in your books, and particularly in your newest book, which is called Landscapes of the Soul. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. But yeah, I think what I loved about your book right off the bat is that from a pastoral perspective, Geoff and Cyd, you both are pastors as well as, professors and coaches and writers and all kinds of things. But from a pastoral perspective, you're offering this attachment theory model to those who are listening and reading as a invitation to move from places of chaos, confusion, anxiety, avoidance, fear, into really a life that God intended for us, that we were designed for, and it's a life of joy and peace. And when we don't see that, and we don't even see, well, we're kind of missing it, even as a church right now, it feels like, the church. It's heavy. It's like, well, there's something is not right. And I think we all know that. But when we feel it, something is not right. God, where are you? What are you doing? What are you up to? So I think this conversation comes at a really good time. I think it really does. So let me just kind of move into this conversation with you. the book, you expertly, I think, and compassionately offer the contents of your book in three movements. And those movements are looking at like the good roots of how God designed us for relational attachment. And then you look at how things have gone wrong. That's the second part of the book, due to sin, or how we've developed these distorted attachments, or these ruptured relationships, which we certainly feel today. And then you move in the last book into this hopeful sense of God's repair of these ruptures as Jesus meets us and then moves us into these deeper pastures of joy and peace. And that's just such a beautiful way of describing the good news. I like how you use that language, that we're designed not just to survive, but to thrive in joy and peace, as if we're in a pasture under the loving and the protective care of a good shepherd. So right off the bat, I sensed this book to be a very hopeful book written from the heart of two pastors. So I would like to ask you both, could you share with the listeners here the reason for your hope?
Yeah, well, the reason for my hope is because God is making all things new. And he is repairing all ruptures. And, we see it in the Bible, in the story of the way that God has always interacted with his people, in that, he is always making the way, regardless of what his people do and how many times they deny him, turn against him, rebel, give up on him. God is always the one taking the initiative to find a way to connect, to find a way to bring them back, to find a way to reveal his heart to them again. And that hasn't changed since the canon of scripture has been formed. That continues through to this day. And even though we don't always see it, and even though we can't always name it, I just have this defiant and stubborn hope that God is repairing all ruptures, and there will come a day, as he promises, when there will be no more sorrow, there will be no more suffering, and the leaves of the tree in the garden of, in the city of God will be the healing for all the nations. And it's just such a compelling vision of what God is up to. And that, when I'm standing in that kingdom hope, things don't look so bleak.
Yeah.
Well, besides agreeing with the preacher in the family there, Cyd, she'll bring the gospel hope for sure. I loved everything she said. I think the thing that I've been leaning on quite a bit comes from just another one of our favorite passages in Hebrews 12. It's like just the end of verse 1 and going into verse 2. It says, "Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith." And it's that idea of Jesus being the trailblazer, the pioneer who has gone before us. And so there's nothing that Jesus is calling us into that he hasn't already done himself for us in his humanity and his divinity. And so that gives me a lot of hope that the suffering, the pain, the joy, the laughter, these are all things that Jesus has done within and for us. And so, so that's kind of what my hope is.
Yeah. Well, you've wrote a couple books together. So, and you've lived together for many years. So thinking back over your life together, Geoff, I remember hearing in another podcast, you were pretty young when you got married, pretty young when you had, I think, your first child, like maybe 25 or something like that. Thinking back over your life, how were you two both drawn to like this subject of attachment theory? Like, was this some pursuit vocationally for either one of you or both of you initially, or how did you find your way into that? And even just thinking about in terms of your marriage, how did you guys end up going on this path together?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I'll try to do just the highlights. It's not vocational. Neither one of us are, trained therapists or counselors. So we have never, needed to study attachment theory as part of our education. It's just something that we have both gotten into based on, interest and the impact that it has had on us. So it started with, and, you read some of my stories in the book, but I experienced trauma when I was pretty young, having lost my dad when I was only 15 months old. And then my mom died suddenly when I was 27. And so like, these are my prime attachment relationships that were both ripped suddenly and unexpectedly from me, of course, at different ages. And I think I had a sense growing up that there was something that wasn't quite right in me, in the sense of like, I don't quite feel like I belong. I don't quite feel like the world is safe. If we go with the questions that we sort of outline in the book, I think I didn't know that people were available to me. I didn't know that the distress that I was currently feeling could be resolved all the time. It sort of felt like it was going to perpetuate forever. I didn't have a strong sense of my own ability to change and make things happen in my life. And so it was really through a process of going to counseling myself and sort of becoming more and more aware of the things that were obstacles and hindrances to me. And I had a track record of sabotaging a lot of relationships and friendships, either by being too clingy or by being, withdrawing and avoiding. And by the time I met Geoff, he would not put up with my old strategies. And so he was sort of the first guy that withstood all of my attempts at manipulation or sabotage. And he just kind of hung in there with me and persevered. Still not sure why, but out of all of that perseverance, then there was finally the realization of, oh, he's not actually going anywhere. Which, and then there's a whole lot of other things that happen in life. And then, as I continued to have the opportunity to do some work in different settings, learned a lot of things about my brain first and neuroscience and how trauma is held in our bodies. And then it was only later that Geoff had been doing some research around attachment science and had gotten really kind of deep into it. And at one point handed me a book and just said, read this. And I read it and went, oh, that makes sense of so many things. But the thing that I experienced in reading about attachment, and I think Geoff would agree with me, is that when I read about attachment, it just, because I read it, started reading more widely. And the thing that kept happening is I kept feeling hopeless as I would read about it, because it was like, here's how you're fundamentally broken and insecure. And there wasn't a whole lot of hopefulness. And I wasn't at that point in time, I don't remember there being anything from a Christian perspective that actually brought God into how is God your secure attachment. And so I just found myself getting sort of deeper and deeper into this, almost a well of despair of like, okay, well, now I understand how broken things are. But I still don't see a way out. And then it was really through the combination of what we've known about, the plasticity of the brain and learning about processing of trauma in the body and everything, and then shoring that up with our theological, foundation that we have together, and lots of conversations and lots of tears and laughter and everything else. It just became like, wow, this is important. And not only to understand attachment, but to understand attachment through the lens of it doesn't define you and you're not stuck there. It's not a label or a personality that you have with you for the rest of your life. It's sort of it's a locator. Like, this is where you find yourself. This is the landscape you're currently in. And there is another landscape, a pasture landscape that Jesus is inviting you into, and you can move.
I also picked up many times in the book that I wanted to be sure to let people know that they didn't really do anything wrong. Like, if you notice you're in this landscape, don't feel bad. Like, you didn't do anything wrong. This is survival, right? This is what you use to survive. Yeah.
Yeah, there's strategies that you developed. And that's why we really try to be careful about using the word strategy instead of, a lot of times you'll hear attachment style.
Yep.
which sounds like a personality and it sounds like
Mm.
something that's lifelong. But when you use the language of an attachment strategy, it's a strategy that you develop to survive the environment that you were in. And it was wise and it
Mhm.
was necessary and you needed it and it makes sense. And maybe your environment has changed and your strategies are no longer working. And so strategies can be learned, they can be unlearned, and you can develop new ones.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Well, you say right at the beginning of, well, I guess this isn't right at the beginning of the book, but you do talk about how we're all born into the world as little scientists, constantly running experiments, collecting data from our earliest years of life. I love, I love that because you don't just say it once. You drop it into the conversation, and then it becomes part of the conversation going forward. So I love that. But you say that we all have a fundamental need to belong, which you say is primarily about finding the people who are available to us. So we have a fundamental need to belong, and it's really about finding the people who are available to us. So my question is this fundamental need to belong the nature of our experiments and our data collecting, or what are we doing even at infancy when you talk about us running experiments? What's that about?
Well, first of all, we have done lots and lots of podcasts and interviews. You're the first one to bring up this topic. Usually we're the ones that have to bring up this metaphor to explain things. So good job to you, Adam. We're going to give you all the
Yay.
props for drawing attention to that. Yeah. So certainly we've heard, especially if you're in like spiritual formation, spiritual direction kind of circles like that idea of like you're a human being, not a human doing, and our search for belonging. It's like so key. And for us, especially, I guess I'll just speak for myself. For me, attachment theory and the science there really kind of helps us fill that out. Because it's one thing to say to somebody, "Hey, you belong. Um, you belong here. You belong with us." And it's another thing, in a sense, to kind of prove it or to live into that, or the difference between saying and showing. And so, attachment theory, it kind of gets into the nitty gritty of like, well, how does that actually happen?
Mhm.
And so to say something like you belong here is nice, but it's really when somebody needs you, and then whether you're available or not becomes like that's when the rubber hits the road. And so we're little scientists. We're trying to we're collecting data. We're running experiments. How does the world work? Especially how does the world of relationships work? And so we talk about these two poles or these two capacities or the two dimensions we say in the book of like independence and intimacy. And those really go together when it comes to a question of belonging.
Mm.
Um, and and it comes to the questions of like who's available to me when I'm in distress, how um, how do I think this distress will be alleviated, and then what is my agency in the midst of this? And so we're running experiments, kind of collecting data about those kind of questions and about intimacy and independence. And so when it comes to belonging, it's something like when I need help, who's around? But not just who's around and will they help me, but how do I get their attention? What do I have to do, right? So I'm contributing to
Mm.
this equation of belonging. People are responding to me. Uh, the whole world is kind of set up in a certain place. What's this environment that I'm? And so we're trying to kind of show how it is that the other people are involved. How am I involved? Because yeah, so we can go around and around on that, but it's basically just we're collecting information and our attachment strategies develop based off the environment that we're in. So if you think of, and we'll just use the idea like the images of a jungle and a desert, is if you had a tool belt or if you had a backpack, you were bringing different things to live well in a jungle. And like bug spray, some sort of water filter, probably
a
some rain
machete.
gear, a machete, swimming trunks, right? You're bringing things to live, not just to survive, but to thrive in a jungle. Now, if you're going to a desert, you're visiting desert on vacation, or you're going to live there for a long time, right? You need a whole different set of tools and not just tools, but experiences and expectations. And so we really kind of use those metaphors, and we also use the metaphor of a war zone just to help people understand that when you are running these experiments and you're getting feedback from the environment and the relationships that you're in, it creates this mental model of how I work in this world, other people work in the world, and just the world itself, how it all works. And that slowly gets formed into something like a jungle, or it slowly gets formed into a desert or a war zone. And then we have these different skills and capacities survival strategies that we've adopted to survive. And surviving is good. And that's where the self-compassion and the understanding that Cyd is so great at really comes in, is we want people to be like, oh, it's when I respond this way as an adult, I regret it. But I could understand why I would respond that way based off of the environment that I was raised in.
Mm-hmm.
And now with that information, I can choose to make different decisions, or I could work on capacities. I can round out my responses, and I can make different decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So from a very young age, like infancy, like baby coming out of the womb, I think you talk about in your book what's happening even when a baby and a caregiver have eye contact, right? Even that would be the beginnings of a brain coming online doing these experiments. Is that correct? Like, is there anyone looking back at me?
Yeah, well, I know, Cyd, were you about to jump in?
Go ahead.
I know Kurt Thompson has this great way of saying it, is like, we're all raised looking for a face that's looking for us, I think is what he says. Mm. Yeah, and that's true. So the first step is what we call joyful connection. Mm-hmm. And this is following Jim Wilder and other people, and who have really kind of looked at the neuroscience. And this is what I find so encouraging and so exciting is it's really only these Christians who have looked at the neuroscience who have emphasized this aspect of joy. So a lot of the attachment researchers, they just focus on the relief of distress, that a secure attachment is one where your distress is relieved within a timely and an appropriate manner, right? And that if that happens enough times, then the idea is that you develop a secure attachment. But really, the research only says that's half the story, and it's not even the most important half. The other half of the story is what you could call amplifying joy, is that children are looking for faces, and then when the face looks at them and smiles back at them, then the game is on. The neurological kind of exercise routine begins, where we're learning to expand joy. And so children spontaneously from a very early age, almost right out of the womb, but certainly at about 4 to 9 months, this kind of nonverbal game eye looking process really happens. And it's a way to kind of ramp up, to become excited, to be to be filled with joy in a literal sense. And that is really good for the nervous system to raise the capacity through joyful encounters. And then that builds in, and it's really a kind of a dialogue conversation, this game. And so that's where the intimacy and the independence starts getting exercised, is you're intimate with somebody through this really deep eye contact. But then there's independence that's being exercised from the child will become overwhelmed, so they'll look away for a couple seconds and then they'll try to engage again. Or the reverse, where the parent's looking away and the kid's trying to get their attention because I love this joy-filled game, so would you come back, right? So you're practicing this independence and this intimacy at such an early age, and that it's actually that capacity building, joyful encounter. If you don't have that, then you really you're going to have a kind of a deficient attachment. And so we really need those positive encounters. It's so important.
Yeah. And if you think about it, it's like we understand who we are based on how people look at us. Like from our very earliest stages, we learn what we're worth, or our value, or sort of what it's like to be around us by watching the faces around us. And so if those faces are sort of flat and providing for all of our needs, but there's no joy, then we might learn, well, people tolerate me, they take care of me, but there's no like sense of I am enjoyable. Like I am a delight. I am a gift. I am a treasure. Whereas if there's a lot of joy expressed, it's a very different understanding of your own identity. And so, the joy center of the brain and the identity center of the brain are actually very closely linked. And the more joy we experience, the stronger sense of self we have, and the stronger sense of it's good to be me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think I remember hearing maybe Wilder or at least Michael Hendricks talking about how in this game of joy and attuning to joy, it's like climbing up Joy Mountain together. I love that image. And you can only take so much though. So it's like your body and your mind needs to like regulate for a moment and then kind of come back. But I really, really love that. And the idea and just the naming joyful connection. I just want to tell you that when that was introduced into the conversation at the beginning of your book, that stuck with me. In fact, I found myself thinking about that everywhere I was going. Oh, that's joyful connection. Oh, that's joyful connection right there. I walked into a room. People were happy to see me. They came to me and hugged me and said, I didn't know you're going to be here. And I'm going, thank you for that joyful connection. You have no idea what that's doing for me. It's like, I'm climbing up Joy Mountain right now. It's just still, I'm 53 years old and I'm still walking into a room wondering, is anyone going to be there, for me? Because there's still always that question, do I belong and where is home and who are my people? And so anyway, that idea of joyful connection is just a beautiful way to describe, I think, this starting point and really what we're after as we are being little scientists. So we've talked about attachment theory a bit, and I'm sure there are many places people can go to find out more information on it. But just as we talk about attachment theory and these strategies, I know you really offer 4, and would love for you to just talk about the 4 strategies as you lay them out in the book. The jungle of anxiety, desert of avoidance, the war zone of chaos, and the pasture of joy and peace. Those are great metaphors. What are they describing when it comes to this attachment theory language? What are we looking for?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with the pasture because that's really the one where it's the goal, right? It's the place where God designed all of us to live. And so it sort of gives us an understanding of what we miss out on when we're not there. So the pasture of joy and peace is this place where you have that joyful foundation, not only with God, but also with other people. And you do have a sense of, it is good for me to be here, and I am loved and I am cherished. And then you also have an equal capacity for both intimacy and independence. So you can be close in relationships. You have close, safe, vulnerable relationships with people. And you know that you can be close and you can be honest and you can be your real, who you are. And you can also offer that intimacy to others. And then at the same time, you also have a strong sense of, and I can go out into the world and I can explore and I can contribute and there are things that God has called me to do. And I have things to make and do around here. And so it's that intimacy and independence in equal measure integrated in that capacity. And then you have this strong, resounding answer of, are people available to me? Absolutely. And how will this distress be alleviated? Well, through a combination of intimacy and closeness with others and my own independence. And what can I use my agency for? I can use my agency to love other people like God lavishly loves me and to flourish the life of others. And that's secure attachment. That is life in the pasture with the good shepherd, where I truly lack nothing because he's always with me and I dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Right. Well, that's not the way that most of us find ourselves. It's not the landscape that most of us would locate ourselves in for a variety of reasons. And so one of the landscapes that we talk about is the jungle. And the jungle, if you think about being in a jungle, you have to really pay attention to your surroundings because things can change quickly. There is things that are good for you, things that are bad for you. You have to really pay attention. And so it's kind of characterized by this anxiety or this hypervigilance of needing to always watch your environment. And that comes from a caregiving environment when you're young of your caregivers are somewhat inconsistent in their ability or their attentiveness to you. And so, sometimes they're fully there for you, all in. Other times they're preoccupied and this is beyond just like, oh, I'm on the phone right now, you'll have to wait. This is just like, I'm just your parent. It doesn't seem to be emotionally available to you. And so this kind of inconsistency is what causes that hypervigilance. It's that you're always watching your people closely, so that when someone is ready to connect with you, you can seize the moment, you can leap in there, right, and make that connection. Another strategy would be like, you might find you are bigger than life because you need to get people's attention, because the jungle is a loud and noisy place. So when you need help, you have to kind of hyper magnify your need so that it's known. Then there's like this just real priority on relationships. And, what it all comes down to is those two capacities of intimacy and independence. You end up prioritizing intimacy at the expense of your own independence. Mm-hmm. And so you will compromise the things that are important to you or the things that you need in order to stay close in your relationships. And you will do whatever is necessary to stay connected. But the gift and, what we really try to do throughout the book is that each of these landscapes is, yes, there are some strategies that are not working for you, and you need to round out your strategies. And you can recognize that this landscape has also given you these incredible gifts that you can offer to the world. And the real gift of the jungle is this incredible attunement and awareness of how people are doing socially and emotionally. And so, people who find themselves in the jungle can walk into a room and immediately tell that something has just happened in this space. And there's something that's being unspoken here, or they can look at a particular person and go, wow, the words they're saying are not matching how they're actually doing. And so there's a curiosity around, like, people in the jungle can make great counselors, spiritual directors, like great helpers if they continue to do, some integrative work. But it's that really strong gift of those social and emotional skills that is the benefit of growing up in a jungle. And, you need to shore up your independence, but that capacity is really strong for people in the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also sort of your only tool, right? It's the only tool.
Yeah. If I could just insert here this idea of the traffic light, by the way, because when we talked about the pasture, you were talking about these questions that we're asking. There's this green light, go, answer that's yes to all of these three questions. What's the color of the light in this jungle?
Yeah, the jungle is a yellow. It's a yellow light. It's, do I speed up? Do I slow down? Do I slam on the brakes? Do I step on the gas? And that's what that sort of indecision is always based on. And how do I make that decision? By looking at my people around me.
Okay. So we're asking questions, and our answer back is maybe, right?
Yeah.
Like, will people be there to help alleviate my pain or anxiety or stress? Maybe. Right?
Maybe.
Where that's that yellow light. So we don't know whether to proceed or to hold back.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jeff, you want to talk about the desert?
Well, I also want to say Adam's the first person to bring up the stoplight at all.
I know.
So this is fantastic. I love it. Yeah, the desert is, just to go back to the stoplight metaphor. So if you're seeking, relationships and working on intimacy and independence, the pasture is like having a green light. You still have to pay attention. You still are in control, but your green means go. And then the yellow light is a maybe. For the desert, when you've put out social, emotional information, when your agency has been based around emotions, you kind of got a no, you got a rejection, maybe you got punished. And so your caregivers were not interested in cultivating that side of you at all. Maybe they took care of you physically in certain ways, but there was like a very clear expectation that, those emotions are kind of to be hidden. We do things this way. We have these rules. We have these patterns. This is how you fit into this environment. And it's very clear. And that part of you kind of gets put off to the side. And after a while, kind of like what what always happens with the bonsai trees that I try to grow is it just, I forget about them and they die, right? And so one of the principles of kind of neuroscience is if you don't use it, you lose it. And so there really is a sense in which our nervous systems are shaped to kind of discard that information. And so you end up kind of developing, like you said, this stoplight that is red. So like, do I pursue relationships? No. Do I be vulnerable with my emotions with other people? No, I don't do that. Why? Because that's just inviting more hurts, more abandonment, more rejection. And I don't want that. Now, that kind of decision is no longer conscious, right? Because we've just been raised as an environment that now it's normal. I'm disconnected from my emotions and my body, and that's fantastic. And I'm disconnected from your emotions and your body, and life is working out great. So the life in the desert is, it's predictable, it's reliable. And so that's why we use this metaphor is that the sun comes out, you're going to get sunburn. That happens every day. So you need to plan on it. It doesn't matter. The sun doesn't care how you feel about it. You just need to be ready. And there's only a little bit of water. And so you need to plan on it. And if you don't plan on it, then you're going to be thirsty, and doggone it, that's your fault. Right. And so you just kind of live in this world where there's clear rules, clear expectations for yourself. You can often be very hard on yourself for not even rising up to the level of your own expectations. You certainly don't ask other people for help. I figured this world out. I live in the desert on my own. And so you create all these survival strategies that optimize living in a desert, which is usually optimizing around your own agency because people are unreliable or they hurt you worse. It optimizes around blaming other people because you're the one doing it the right way and they've screwed up your system. It optimizes around solving your own problems and kind of following the rules, like we said. So it's long term. It's very tragic, when people are stuck in the desert, but it's very understandable how that happens based off of the environment that they were raised in, that slowly and surely, they were formed, literally they're formed, their brains and bodies are formed around a certain way of surviving. And so they get really good at it.
And so the inconsistency or the inequality there is, the jungle prioritizes intimacy at the expense of independence, whereas the desert is prioritizing independence at the expense of intimacy. But again, there's a gift from the desert, and the gift from the desert is this great ability to think in logical and linear ways. And so to be able to look at bigger pictures, to look at strategies, to see patterns, to see that there is actually like a trajectory to things. There is this organized thought process for people in the desert that people in the jungle desperately need. And then people in the jungle have this incredible social and emotional, intelligence that the people in the desert really need. And so part of the way that we all grow toward the pasture together is by being in community with each other. And, when you're weak on intimacy, you learn intimacy from someone who's strong. And when you're weak on independence, you learn from someone who's strong. And so, working together to work on integrating and shoring up the capacities that we're weak in is really part of the gift of being part of a community of people rather than trying to do it on your own. Because, God designed us to be in relationship, and that's part of the way that healing journey works. And then the last landscape is called the war zone. And this one is really, it's the war zone of chaos, because it's an environment growing up where generally the case would be that you're the same people that you need to connect with are the ones who are also hurting you or neglecting you in an extreme way. And so it causes this incredible confusion and this conflict within yourself, because you want to connect, but you're scared to connect. You want to do things on your own, but when you do, maybe you get punished or you don't know if you're doing the right thing. And so it's always this sort of conflict between the parts of you that really want to attach with somebody and really get connected, but then the parts of you that just feel desperate to to protect yourself. And sometimes that can be, you just are defending yourself. And so that conflict can feel very internally confusing for someone in the war zone. And then of course, for the people in your life, it can feel very confusing because you're going back and forth between, I want to connect, but I'm also defending myself against you because you feel dangerous to me. But again, those strategies make sense because you needed them and you had to be on your guard, and you couldn't come up with an organized strategy that worked all the time. And, like we really want to express strongly is that doesn't mean that you're beyond repair. It doesn't mean that you're now stuck and hopeless where you are, because Jesus has so much compassion. And he meets people in the war zone in the same way he meets people in the desert and in the jungle, and his desire is to invite all of us into the pasture with him. Nobody is left behind. Jesus leaves the 99 to go after that lost sheep. And I think that's the best news, is that Jesus comes to us where we are rather than demanding that we find our way to him. And, that incredible initiative, again, that God is always taking, of I want to be repairing this rupture, and I'm going to take initiative to do that.
So in this war zone, our yes, no, and our maybe filter, or our traffic light, what's going on there?
The traffic light is on the fritz. Yeah.
Yeah, it's broken.
There's not really a clear signal ever. It's like, it's just confusing.
Yeah, I picked up on at that part of the book a very pastoral, compassionate, slowing down, really like if words could be the presence of another person, really offering your presence to somebody reading that, going, I don't know if I can read this alone. And like just in your words and the way you showed up in that chapter, it was like you were saying, we're with you, as if to say God is with you, right? And so as you're reading this, especially know if this is you, you're not alone, and this is not the end of your story. So I just want to say I really appreciated that tender care, particularly for this chaos in the war zone. Thank you.
Well, we especially had a heart for that because, especially, churches aren't trying to create environments where it's difficult to be a person in the war zone, but, it can be very confusing because you long to be in community and you so often experience rejection or harm because people don't know how to meet you where you're at. And, that's really our big heart in writing this book, because we want people in churches, whether they're pastors and leaders, whether they're small group, discussion facilitators, whether it's just your average person in the church. Like if people can understand a little bit more about people are where they are because they needed to be, and Jesus meets with compassion. So how can we increase our compassion for one another by understanding that people have developed these strategies? And then how can we learn to companion each other well as we all want to journey together toward the pasture?
Yeah, it's beautiful. I have one more question that relates to kind of the layering, the deepening of this whole thing. And so you've already talked about these 3 questions. I'm just going to review them. Are others available to me when I'm in distress? That's question 1. 2, will this distress be alleviated? 3, how do I use my agency amid the distress? I just want to say a huge aha moment for me reading the book, like literally like writing, whoa, next to this section was when you layered in faith, hope, and love, this biblical ideas and themes of faith, hope, and love into those 3 questions. I thought that was brilliant. Like, wow. Just Geoff, can you maybe just talk us through really briefly, like how faith, hope, and love play into this?
Yeah. Well, as I was doing the research and I was coming up with the kind of these, for those who know the language, like we're describing what are called internal working models as the attachment languages. And as I was going through that, I was just thinking like, this sounds a lot like what the Bible talks about for faith, hope, and love, especially when we get out of the understanding that faith is kind of like content about who God is, but it's rather a commitment to being in relationship with God. So some people call that allegiance or something like that. And so it's the lived out faith. And so, I was just kind of like going through and I was like, I think, how we view other people really, some people might use the word trust, like how do we trust people, right? But, Paul talks about faith and, and then certainly the biblical theme of hope. And you get that a lot in the Old Testament, especially in the Psalms, that we hope in the Lord, that we also wait in the Lord. And so it's kind of like that temporal aspect of it. And so this is where the attachment research, we'll talk about how after a while, usually around like 4, but even earlier, you start getting these internal conceptions that help you persist in time. So you could talk about delayed gratification, but it's also this idea of like, oh, this is hard now, but I've gone through enough of these cycles where the hard thing became a good thing, or the hard thing stopped being so bad. And I was with somebody when that happened. And so that's where the faith and the hope then start working together, is because I have faith that someone's available, they're going to be with me, so that then this hard thing can become not a hard thing. And so that's this distress will be alleviated at some point. And not always how I expect. And so that's part of the research too, is like, I'm not always getting what I want, but in some way it's being, so that's where the hope is. And then really trying to understand the idea of love as being part of our agency, as not just an emotion or something we feel, but it's kind of part of what we're putting out in the world. And it's trying to understand that we love God and we love others through how we act in the world. And the idea is that when we're really good and we have these really full capacities, or back to the stoplight, if we have a green light of faith, hope, and love, like it's all green lights, then we can be the kind of people that pour out that love to other people to start that process of secure attachment in somebody else. So only when you have these really strong green lights that then you can overflow in love. And then that love then starts building faith in somebody else. It starts building hope in somebody else. And it starts building the capacity of somebody else. And the really good news is that while we live in a world that's broken and full of sin, things are not how they're supposed to be, that cycle of passing on love isn't just part of the human cycle, but that God's adding it to us. Whenever in faith we turn to God, then that faith can grow. Then, the hope and the love of the Spirit is being poured out into our souls. And Jesus has walked this before. So all of us can be repaired, even as we're hoping to pass along something else to somebody else. And so that for me is good news.
That is really good news. And I think that's a great way to wrap up our conversation. There are so many things in your book, Geoff, Cyd, gold. I mean, really gold. I just can't say enough about it. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for maybe bringing your own attachment strategies from ways you were raised and even into the writing of this book, because I'm sensing one of you has a very linear way of approaching things. The other one has a very intimate, relational, perhaps way of approaching things. And together, wow, this book lands. I mean, I really do think it's one of the best books I've read for sure on this subject. And so, I just want to say thank you to both of you for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for reading it and for having us on today. It's been great to talk with you. And for the great questions that you've asked us.
That's right.
Thanks. Well, just as we close, Cyd, is there any hopeful words that you might want to offer to those who are listening and who are just presently feeling their own sense of discouragement or even overwhelm just by their past or even the landscape maybe they find themselves in today?
Yeah, I think that, the thing I would want to say is the thing I almost always find myself saying, and that is, you make sense, right? Like where you are and what you're experiencing makes sense because of the life that you've lived and the stories that have been part of your life. Like it makes sense that you are where you are. And like, it's God loves you right where you are. Jesus comes to you right where you are. And he comes without any condemnation. He doesn't come wagging his finger and saying, I told you shouldn't be here, or how did you get here? But instead he comes to you and says, I'm so glad to be with you right here in this place. And then invites you to follow him and to be with him.
Thank you. Thank you both for being guests here today on the Being Formed podcast. It's a joy and a delight to meet you.
You too, Adam. Yeah.
It's been a delight.
Well, friends, I hope that conversation with Geoff and Cyd Holsclaw encouraged you the way it encouraged me. Their book, Landscapes of the Soul, is such a helpful invitation to pause, to notice where we are in our journey with God, and to remember that no matter what terrain we're walking through, God is present with us. I'd love for you to connect with Geoff and Cyd, pick up a copy of their book. I'll have links in the show notes. As always, thanks for being part of the Being Formed podcast. If this episode was meaningful to you, would you share it with a friend? It's one of the best ways for others to join in on these conversations of encouragement and formation. Make sure you check out our website, lifepointresources.org, to see some of the events that we have coming up. We've been co-branding some events with a good friend of ours, Brandon Booth, with Signpost Inn, and he's offering some wonderful events and opportunities for online gathering. So check that out. And until next time, grace and peace.